Hey, it's Matt with Meat Church, and welcome back to my outdoor kitchen. Can our crazy popular Mexican pulled pork recipe work on a brisket? So we have this Mexican pulled pork recipe on meatchurch.com and also a video on this YouTube channel, and it is just insanely popular. It's so popular that it has made its way into my BBQ Schools as one of the primary meats that I teach. I grew up in the South, so when you said pulled pork to me, it meant sweet, it meant barbecue sauce, not savory at all. And first off, this thing's not all that Mexican, is always my joke, but a competition cook buddy of mine, Woody, we've talked about this for a long time, and he came up with this concept of slathering a pork butt in Cholula hot sauce and seasoning it with our fajita seasoning, which is salt, pepper, garlic, onion, citrus, no sugar at all, and making a savory pork butt. And if you grew up on sweet, getting this contrast of savoriness is awesome. It makes amazing tacos. And like I said, it's so popular that we've basically been forced to teach it at our BBQ Schools. And Don on our crew has been saying for months, you gotta try a brisket like that. So full disclosure, we've never done this. This is a test. I don't think it'll be bad based on how good it is on pork, so we're gonna give it a shot. And the great thing about it, we're gonna chop this up or pull it or something like that at the end, probably chop it because it's easier. And anytime you can chop an entire brisket, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. Clearly you can make tacos, tostadas, nachos, sandwiches, like all sorts of stuff. You can bag up leftovers, save it, really versatile. You know it's gonna be great. The other thing is you don't have to buy an amazing piece of beef when you plan on chopping it. So you don't have to buy a prime grade. You could save some money and buy a lower grade, select, choice, something like that. But this, starting out, it's a 15-pound brisket that we got at our local HEB, and I've just trimmed it to this point. I'm not gonna trim it for you today. I'll put a card up here on my trim method, but I always say I trim pretty aggressively, and what I mean by that is I trim it down to where the flat is not so thin anymore, so that it all cooks. It's all great basically in the end, but you don't have to trim this aggressively if you don't want to. So let's jump into this. So we're starting out with the Cholula as our hot sauce for a binder, and it doesn't have to be Cholula, it can be whatever you want. I'm going with what Woody started with, and this is what we use on the pork, so here we are. We're just gonna hammer it with it. And a lot of times people say, you know, binders don't really affect the flavor profile. Well, we're gonna use this Cholula 3 times, so you will taste it. And before you're too worried about it, it's not gonna be all that hot. If you follow my recipes for a long time, you know that I like hot, but I'm not a fan of like super hot personally. So this is gonna be just fine for you. And you know, just keep your audience in mind. You know, if you've got your kids involved, then maybe don't do so much of this, but adults love this on pork, as I keep saying. So we've got it pretty slathered up here. And let's talk about seasoning. I mentioned that we're gonna use our fajita seasoning. So the fajita seasoning actually has less salt than Holy Cow, but it can taste salty if you put too much of it on certain things. That's not gonna be the case with this because this is a huge piece of meat. But I'm gonna start with just straight black pepper. This is 16 mesh pepper. This is the same pepper that's in Holy Cow. I keep it on hand because I'm a pepper lover. Pepper catches smoke, it helps build bark. So I'm just gonna add some extra pepper onto the top of it. This is optional, just something that I like to do. I do it on all sorts of meats, chickens, ribs. I like to contrast for the pepper pops as it comes through. And as I said, it helps build bark. So I'll do that on the other side in a moment too. But first, let's go fajita. I'm gonna go pretty heavy because again, you're gonna chop this up. You're not gonna hurt it. It's not gonna be too salty. I'm just gonna pat it on, flip it over to the other side. I cook fat side up. That's why I season the meat side first. Pepper first. Make sure you get your edges. You can use the board to get your edges too. Always say this, I like to season at least 12 inches high, if not 18, maybe a little higher, because I want an even application. If you get too close when you're seasoning, you'll get real splotchy, put a bunch in a certain area, so just nice and even. I'm just gonna pat it on here. Now what I would normally do I always tell people, like, I feel like people are preparing briskets on the weekends. If that's the case, I would love to do everything we've done to this point at night, Friday night. Trim it, come home from work, crack open a beer, trim your brisket, slather it, season it, put it in a pan, put it in your fridge and just let it sit. I'd love to let seasoning it here for at least an hour or so, really let it penetrate, you know, go overnight if you can. Don't always have that amount of time, so just work with what you got. But I'm gonna hand this off. And let's talk about how we're gonna cook this one, because good news for y'all and better news for my crew is they don't have to be here all day. I've actually been smoking a brisket all day that I prepared like that. So let me talk about my fire first. So today I'm cooking on my mill scale 94-gallon offset smoker. You can replicate this recipe on any type of cooker that you have. I always teach time and temperature, so whether you're cooking on a pellet grill, Kamado grill, offset smoker, maybe you wanna make this in your oven, you get to choose whatever your cooking device is. In this case, we're running a mill scale. I'm shooting for 250 degrees. It's running a little hot at the moment, but we're cooking this with mesquite. So mesquite is a really popular Texas wood, particularly in South Texas. To me, mesquite burns a little hot. It has kind of a distinct taste. Wood is a pairing with whatever it is that you're cooking, and so I thought that would pair nicely with this. We started this fire out in a charcoal chimney that my buddy Matt at Cotton Gin Smokers made for me. We built the fire in there, we dumped it in the firebox, and then we've been running chunks of mesquite or smaller, not chunks, but smaller pieces of mesquite in this fire. I've been cooking a brisket for just over 7 hours, right at about 7.5 hours. Said I was shooting 250. It's okay if you go lower, it's okay if you go higher. It's an offset, your temperatures are gonna fluctuate. This pit runs like a dream. I'm gonna open it up. You see the one that's been cooking. I'm gonna grab some gloves and I'm gonna bring it out for you guys to see. All right. So I'll use my instant read. First off, you can, cooking for me is visual. You can see bark has formed pretty nicely. We're at 170. I usually like to wrap about 175, but with this recipe, since we're chopping it in the end, you could have wrapped at 165, you could have wrapped at 180, and we're gonna wrap in a pan. So, like I said, really pretty bark. Now, that seasoning is kind of orangish reddish in color, so this isn't gonna be as dark as like a holy cow brisket or something like that. So that kind of explains why it looks the way that it looks. So we're gonna put this in a pan, because now it's time to wrap, and we're gonna put some more goodness in this wrap. First thing I'm gonna do is this is where we're gonna add more hot sauce. So this takes me back to my competition barbecue days. When folks wrap briskets, pork butts, they put all kinds of stuff in it. If you follow like our typical brisket recipes, like a Texas brisket, I would never do anything like this. I would not be putting anything on this brisket. I would be simply wrapping it in butcher paper with a little cider vinegar, and that's it. So this is like, because we're adding crazy amounts of flavor to this. All right. Now we're gonna go for the good part, butter. I always tell people, there's a lot of butter in cooking, way more than you want. Put at least a stick. I'm actually going 2 sticks today because I'm feeling extra fat. Use however much you want. This is a good butter. It's gonna add some richness. Obviously it's gonna melt off and be down in the pan, and this brisket is just gonna be kind of swimming in that. And then lastly, we're gonna put a little bit of stock or broth, which I've brought both out to show you. Generally, I prefer stock in my cooking, which is, the difference is this is made from bones generally. I make my own stock often. I don't have any homemade beef stock now, so these are just some that I picked up in my local H-E-B. I'm gonna use broth today simply because this broth is open and I like to not waste stuff. I put about a cup in. And you can either pour it across the brisket like this, or you can just pour it around in the pan. No need to measure it. This is a braising liquid. So what we're doing here, adding some moisture to this pan, we're gonna cover it with foil, we're gonna go back in the cooker, and we're gonna cook this until it's what I call probe tender. So it's gonna be, just north of 200 degrees, where this thing is just gonna fall apart. And like I said, we can pull it, we can, probably gotta go over 210 to pull it, but we can chop it or whatever it is that we're looking to do. So there you go, you can see that. So now I'm gonna wrap it up in foil. We're gonna go back in the pit And let's talk temperature from here. Not all that important. You have a lot of latitude. You're not getting any more smoke because you're wrapping in foil. If you're in a hurry, run your pit up. 275, 300, 325, even hotter if you need to. If you want to elongate the cook, you can drop it down. If you need to, if it's like a long time before you're gonna eat, then drop your temperature down. Also great to braise in pellet grills because you can control the temperature. You can leave, you can go do something else. So lots of options on how you get this cooked after you wrap it in foil. Got my handy dandy Costco foil. I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm gonna put it in the pit, and I bet this takes 2 to 3 hours max to be tender. All right, back in the pit we go, and I'll see y'all when it's tender. All right, the brisket's been cooking about 3 hours. I've probed it, it's tender. Let's get it out and take a look at it. And it's hot. Well, this isn't gonna look nearly as pretty as a brisket that we normally cook. Where's all that steam? I mean, you can see visually right off the bat, you've got where that butter just kind of sat up there and melted. I'm definitely not mad at that. And just feel that, just like there's no resistance whatsoever. It's like butter. It's over 200 degrees, 209. This thing is good to go. I've got insulated gloves on. I'm gonna pull this out of here. Be careful when you do this. This is gonna be hot. Put it on your block. Now the beauty of cooking a brisket like this is you don't have to let it rest as long as you would a normal brisket because you're just gonna chop it all up. But I'm gonna bring a fat separator in here and I'm gonna pour all this jus in here. So you got butter, stock, jus that's come out of the brisket. I'm gonna let that sit, and when the fat separates, I will dump out the fat, and then I will keep the rest of the juice. I'll discard this because there's too much. And then that's what we will dredge this brisket back through. So while this is kind of hanging out and that's separating, I'm gonna get some fresh tortillas that I got this morning, and I'm gonna head over to the back of the firebox and we're gonna warm them up. Super duper hot with the IR gun. Who knew the mill scale offset also doubled as my tortilla warmer? I'm just going like 30 seconds aside, make sure they're nice and warm. I'm gonna chop this brisket. I've put a disposable cutting board down here on top of my block because my Iron Grove cleaver is super duper sharp and I don't want to destroy my block. You can see that the fat has separated. So this bottom is a super good stuff that we're going to put back in this pan. We'll do that after we get this chopped, but for now, I'm just gonna chop this brisket up. All right, that's good and chopped up. So we're just gonna go into this pan. And this is where we're gonna taste test it. Obviously, we wanna see how the recipe was, but more importantly than that, this is where you're going to decide how much hot sauce or fajita do you wanna add. And this is really important and I think a really good lesson for a lot of types of meats that you do. I always say it with pulled pork. Pulled pork is a big cut of meat. You should be adding seasoning after you pull it. It's gonna make it just that much better. All right, let me get this out the way. So back in with this, with all this goodness that we got right here. This is gonna be obviously super juicy now. Okay. Mix it up. Super nice and wet. So I want to try this before we go to build our final product. Just give me a nice little handful here. Surprisingly, I ain't mad at it. It's actually like really good. It has great flavor. I'm gonna add a little more to it. You could eat it just like that. Not too salty, despite all that we put on there. But this really will kick it up a notch. Let's add a little hot sauce. This is to taste. This is like whatever you want to do. And then I don't think we need a whole lot of seasoning. We're gonna do a little bit. I peeled a glove off, so I gotta one-hand it. Now remember, you can do all sorts of stuff with this. You can make enchiladas, tacos clearly, chopped beef sandwiches, tortas, tostadas, whatever. I actually don't know what we're gonna do this, so we're just gonna kind of wing it. Because we always have all kinds of taco stuff in the Meat Church house. So that part's not gonna be hard. Got my tortillas here that we heated up. By the way, these were corn tortillas made this morning just down the street at my Super Garcia. So they're super duper fresh. I'm gonna use my hand, this is my food. Corn tortillas where it's at for me normally. All right, a lot of meat. Here's some onions that I pickled this weekend. This recipe is also on meatchurch.com. All my recipes are always on meatchurch.com. Pickled red onions are a staple in Texas barbecue. I love them. My guac was hiding from me. Here, let's put the onions on top. A little bit of guac. Gotta have guac. There we go. Speaking of pickled, fingers in. They're mine. Nobody can say anything. Don't tell Mrs. Meat Church I did that. She gets pissed when I reach in the pickle jar with my fingers. She don't watch these videos, so I'm good. Ooh, a little crema. Now you can go hot sauce if you want. Of course we want to. There's a lot of hot sauce in it, so you don't have to, but I'm gonna put a little bit on there. This is Yellowbird jalapeno hot sauce we buy at our H-E-B. Haha, can't have Texas barbecue without Big Red. Here we go. That's the best thing I've eaten in a long time. God dang, that's good. All right, finish the video strong, Matt. That's amazingly good. All those homemade flavors we got in there. Y'all have to make this. This is a winner. I can't believe we didn't do this sooner. Don, you were right. He's proud. He's gonna be asking for a raise. This is amazingly good. The brisket cooked quicker than a normal brisket cook, right? Because you just really need to get it to 165. You could have foiled it probably 6 hours in. Anytime you foil a brisket, especially when you put a braising liquid in it, you braise it to the end, you're speeding up the cook process. Like I said earlier, we could have increased that second temp. Instead of doing 250, we could have went 325, 350 and finished this brisket super duper fast. You don't have to do the rest in this case, since you're dredging it in its own juice and you're eating. This is crazy, crazy good, easy, something you could actually do during the week. I recommend, I love smoking meats on the weekend, getting the amount of smoke you want on it, back sealing it, putting it away. And then you could actually do this braise in a pellet grill all day. You could do it in a sous vide bath. You could in a vac seal bag, put this in sous vide 165, let it run all day. By the time you get home from work, you're gonna be able to just pull the brisket apart. A lot of flexibility on how you could actually finish this brisket, but this is gonna make a ton of meals. I'm excited to make nachos with it for the family tonight. If you like what we're doing, please like and subscribe. We'll see y'all next time. Well, we're here in my barbecue supply shop, continuing the post-video wrap-up. I'm excited and trying not to be nervous because I have an audience here of folks that have come in from Iowa and Michigan, and we've said, hey, you should stay and watch this and video it and leak it on social media because that'll be cool. But anyway, the main thing we want to talk about in this video is something that happened as soon as the camera's turned off. I know I've given props to my dude Don twice in this video, but let's make it 3 times. He looked at me and he said, I've never seen you eat like that after a video. We make a lot of tacos, and I know a lot of the things that we talk about, we say it's good, you should make this. That's not an automatic reaction. Most things that we have made in the past, we know they're gonna be good. We had never made this recipe, and I don't know that I've ever had a taco that good. I have a favorite taco, the one that we make with our beef ribs and truffle horseradish cream And that's something we serve at food and wine festivals, planning on serving it at Fort Worth Food and Wine at the end of March, and I think it might have just got displaced by this. It's that good, so you have to do it. I did not tell you how to make the pickled jalapenos. I mentioned the pickled red onions are on meatchurch.com. It's the exact same process. You heat up the pickling liquid, and then you just cut up fresh jalapenos, drop them in a jar, and bam, they're good to go the next day. They're not hot. They might make the taco, so don't leave that out. Another thing occurred to us, this is a very easy beginner brisket. A lot of people that we run into are afraid to make the purchase of a brisket because it's a lot of money and they don't want to screw it up. Yes, this is a very non-traditional recipe, and it was about copious amounts of butter, because I ain't here to help you lose weight, hot sauce, fajita seasoning, but it was awesome. So you could buy this, you cannot screw it up. When you put it in that pan with the braising liquid, it's foolproof, or I'll give you your money back. Anyway, like and subscribe. Thanks for being here. We'll see y'all next week.